At the base of Innocent Zero, we see Cell apologizing for being late in returning. However, he says he has found what they've been looking for. The person he's speaking to states that because of this, he will be able to achieve his wish. He orders Cell's men to retrieve it. Meanwhile, news about Mash's inability to use magic has begun to spread. Meanwhile, all the coins in the school went to Adler, showing that Mash and his friends were getting closer to becoming divine visionaries. Mash and Finn were having a conversation. Mash said he was glad they resolved that problem quickly and suggested it was time to celebrate their victory. Finn asked if they had really solved it. Suddenly, it showed our heroes trying to convince others that Mash really did have magic by shouting at people until they gave in. But not everyone at the school knew the truth. As Finn spoke, someone shouted Mash's name. The man asked if it was true Mash couldn't use magic. Finn thought they were done for. Mash replied firmly that he did know how to use magic. He kept repeating it until his brain seemed to shut down. Finn commented that what they taught Mash seemed to be working. The man told him not to lie because everyone already knew and that Mash was facing a big problem. Finn then pulled Mash away to leave. Suddenly, the man warned that protecting a non-magic user would bring trouble for Finn. The man continued, saying Finn might still be a student now, but because of his actions, he could be expelled. The man asserted again that Mash could not use magic and should stop lying. He questioned the point of protecting a no-magic like Mash. Finn yelled at the man to shut up, saying it was his decision who he wanted to be with. Suddenly, the man was seen face down on the floor. Finn was surprised, having just found the courage to speak up. When he looked back, he saw what had happened. It was Lance who had knocked the man down. Finn asked why Lance did that. Lance replied that the man had angered him. Mash celebrated the display of sibling love. Then, others arrived, Lemon and Dot. Dot was completely bandaged and in a wheelchair. Dot tried to speak but could only make sounds. Lemon explained Dot's injuries were worse than they thought. 6 broken ribs, a fractured skull, compound fractures on his hands and feet, blood blisters, and damage to various organs. The man stood up, then ran away, saying they were lucky because he was letting them off. In the next scene, after class, Mash and his friends celebrated inside Adler's dorm room 302. Mash said that now that they had Lance's coins, they could relax until the Divine Visionary selection started. Finn thought they were setting aside a big issue. It also showed that Abyss and Abel were at their celebration. Finn wondered why they were there and noticed Abel never put down the doll he was holding. Suddenly, Abel took out a deck of cards and asked if anyone wanted to play. Finn thought maybe Abel really wanted to party. Abel said he didn't intend to befriend them, but he could celebrate Abyss's recovery with them. Finn thought Abel shouldn't have said that. Suddenly, Abyss spoke, warning that anyone who dared to beat Abel in a card game would die by his hands. Lemon told Abyss not to say such things and handed him a cup of tea. Abyss was stunned. Lemon wondered why. Abyss tried to say thank you, but started shaking nervously, then blew out air like a fool. Abel explained to Lemon that Abyss had little experience with women, to the point where even saying the word girl was hard for him. Meanwhile, Lemon made noise while taking Dot's food, saying, "What's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine." She then told Mash she would serve him as thanks for what he'd done. Mash thanked her, but said he could eat on his own. Suddenly, Lemon freaked out and splattered food onto Mash. While she cleaned up, she asked Lance where he had been during the fight. Lance explained that after fighting the Lang student who fell, he ran into some death row inmates. Finn stayed quiet as his companions did their own thing at the table. Suddenly, Abyss called out to Mash. Mash turned, and Abyss thanked him for inviting them. Then, with a serious expression, he warned that Innocent Zero was focusing on Mash. They were the worst criminal organization in the world, and they were searching for the most unfortunate magic user in the school. Abyss revealed that in exchange for Abel's help, Innocent Zero had given him power. Specifically, Abel's third line was an artificial addition gifted to him by them. Natural triple liners were supposedly even more powerful than Abel. Abel had needed the coins, so he borrowed power from Innocent Zero, a sacrifice made for the greater good. But it seemed Mash had some kind of connection to the person Innocent Zero was searching for. Abyss warned him to be careful, because they would surely return. We need to face the punishment for what we've done. That's what they deserve for disregarding the environment, Abel said. He just wanted to create a world where good people like his mother could live peacefully. He thanked Mash for stopping him and said he believed Mash could build a world where everyone could live in peace. That was what Abyss wanted to see. Mash nodded in agreement. While this was happening, the man from earlier returned to confront Mash. He declared that he was no longer scared and planned to get proof that Mash couldn't use magic. Peeking into the room, he saw Abyss talking to Mash and recognized him as the second best of Lance's group. He wondered why Abyss was with Mash. Suddenly, someone appeared behind him. When he turned, it was Abel. Abel asked if he needed anything. The man trembled in fear, wondering why Abel was there. Recognizing him as the top dog of Lance's group, he screamed. Meanwhile, inside the room, Abyss shivered again because Lemon had asked what they were discussing. The Divine Visionaries. They were the foremost magic users in the world and the force that kept it running. They handled most of the work related to magic and also acted as a state-sanctioned force protecting society against those who would disrupt it. To symbolize their role as servants of the divine, they were given titles marking them as ones of God. Then, at the Bureau of Magic, Mash was on trial concerning rumors that he had concealed his magicless status from them. The day before, when Mash was with his friends, he suddenly received a letter. Upon opening it, Lemon and Abyss were surprised. Mash had indeed been summoned to the Bureau of Magic. Back in the present, Mash was being questioned by the Blessed Minister, Vice Director of the Bureau. He said that Mash hiding his condition was a serious crime, and even worse, it wasn't discovered during enrollment. The minister asked who created their world. Mash answered if it was some big shot. The minister said it was God who created the world. As God's creation, the world was a thing of beauty. Magic was a miracle given by God to people. But there was someone threatening that miracle, and that was Mash. Mash was puzzled. The minister said he was a bug in the system that needed to be fixed immediately before disrupting the order. Mash remained confused. The minister shouted that it wasn't Mash's place to decide. Suddenly, someone interrupted, saying there was no such thing as unshakable confidence. The minister was surprised. The man said in the end, only success mattered. What Mash needed was not confidence, but self-belief. Mash had potential to become a real man. The man was the Light Came Ryle, captain of the Magic Security Forces. The minister called him Lord Visionary and asked what he was doing there. Ryle said it wasn't important and asked if his question to Mash was correct. Mash agreed. Ryle explained that they all followed rules that fit the majority. If they tried to accommodate everyone, there would be no stability. So, what if Mash was not part of the majority? It was simple. Mash needed to convince the majority to support him. He didn't need to be right. What mattered was who was speaking. Ryle suddenly threw a candle, puzzling Mash. He told Mash to light the candle without touching it. Mash asked if that was really possible. Ryle said magic was the most important thing in their world, so Mash needed to show a miracle stronger than magic. If Mash truly was manly, he should show it. Mash just stared at the candle. The minister thought it was nonsense to order a non-magic user to light a candle from a distance. Suddenly, Mash took out a wand. What could a non-magic user do with a wand? Mash sat down casually. Ryle was criticized for giving Mash an impossible task, expecting him to surrender. Suddenly, Mash started spinning the wand on the floor, puzzling the minister. He realized Mash was rubbing the wand against the marble floor at an extraordinary speed. Because of this, Mash created fire through friction. Soon, Mash lit the candle. He seemed to understand he would change the world with his fists. Ryle was pleased and commented on Mash's spirit. Suddenly, someone announced the Divine Visionaries had arrived. They were informed they would deal with a magicless student. One was silent, another was complaining but being calmed, another wondered what Wahlberg was thinking, and another felt cold. One said they existed to maintain order, with no exceptions. At the Bureau of Magic, Mash had just overcome Rio's challenge. He stated that it seemed the trial was over, but Bless shouted that the decision wasn't up to Mash. Suddenly, sand coiled around Mash's feet and another magical attack followed. Mash stood unharmed, but Rio recognized the attacker. The Divine Visionaries began to arrive, suggesting Mash had spoken too soon. The Immortal Cane, Renatus Revel, explained that Wahlberg had summoned them. The Ice Cane, Sarara Hailstone, casually suggested hitting MASH with a book to end it. The Flame Cane, Caldo Gehenna, was introduced next, followed by the Dragon Cane, Agito Tyrone. Sophina Biblia, the Knowledge Cane, cited regulations and advocated for leniency. Finally, the Desert Cane, Orter Madel, emphasized that the rules existed to remind them of different perspectives. Exceptions, he argued, would weaken the system. Mash had hidden his lack of magic and enrolled in Easton Academy. Death was the proper punishment. The decision was unanimous. Mash stood there in disbelief. Then Bless stepped forward, shaking and seemingly overtaken by another presence. His voice changed. Everyone turned to him as he declared, "We are Innocent Zero." Innocent Zero claimed ownership of MASH and warned the visionaries not to interfere. They revealed they had implanted a magical parasite inside Bless. It was explained, a delicate creature that consumes mana while using the host's body as a chrysalis. Removing it causes it to bond with the extractor, marking them as a threat. Ryo offered to remove the parasite himself, but Neri warned that the stronger the person, the greater the risk. They could be crystallized instantly. Ryo didn't care. But before Ryo could act, Mash stepped up and casually pulled the parasite out of Bless with his bare hands. It flew into his mouth. Everyone stared in shock as Mash calmly spit it back out, shaped like a balloon animal. Neri realized Mash hadn't killed the parasite. He had used his tongue to tie it and immobilize it like a cherry stem trick. Mash, unfazed, said they'd heard Innocent Zero's message and saved Bless, so they were done here. Ryo called him a treasure, but Order interrupted, insisting Mash's judgment still stood. Rules were rules. Mash planted his feet and refused to leave. Order appeared behind him in a flash, aiming a blade at Mash's head until Ryo shouted for him to stop. Ryo argued that Order claimed the decision was unanimous, yet hadn't heard his view. Then a massive sword landed between them. It was Wahlberg and Rain. Wahlberg pleaded with the visionaries to reconsider. He pointed out that Innocent Zero had just made a move. They couldn't afford to lose Mash now. Mash asked if Wahlberg was important. Ryo explained he was a former divine visionary, the only one who had ever stood against Innocent Zero, a living legend. Even Ryo respected him. Wahlberg then bowed, shocking everyone. Sophina said he didn't need to do that, but Wahlberg insisted Mash couldn't use magic, wasn't refined, and wasn't a scholar, but he had the power to reach people's hearts. He believed their values needed to evolve. People like Mash were essential to that change. He admitted society had always looked down on those without magic. Changing that required courage. Order replied that he respected Wahlberg, but the rules were clear. Magicless people were to be eliminated. Rain stepped in to support Wahlberg and insisted Mash deserved their trust. Caldo remained firm that opinions didn't change laws. Revel called it boring and wanted to end it. Sophina reminded them the public wouldn't accept an exception. Order declared Mash would be executed. Bless then spoke again, admitting he shared the bias toward the powerless, believing they weren't fit to stand with magic users. But someone like that had saved his life. Even if it meant punishment for dereliction, he would stand by his judgment. Mash deserved a chance. After a tense exchange of looks, the visionaries agreed under two conditions. They would observe all of Mash's movements, as he would now serve as a tool in their battle against Innocent Zero, and he must become the Divine Visionary Candidate of the Year. If he failed, he would die. Mash accepted, but he added if he truly wished to fulfill Wahlberg's dream and live in peace, then simply following orders wouldn't be enough. He slammed the ground with a fist, causing a massive quake. He then declared that he would personally crush Innocent Zero with his own fists. Elsewhere, the leader of Innocent Zero sensed Mash's declaration and felt it as a threat. Mash recounted everything to his friends. Lance was stunned to learn Mash lacked magic, and Finn realized this meant he was now caught in a serious situation. Dot, on the other hand, said he understood and suddenly declared they needed to have fun. They went to Marchette Street. Finn thought Dot might have suggested the outing for Mash's sake. Maybe having fun was better than stressing out all night. He wondered what his friends looked like outside their uniforms. Someone called his name. Finn turned and saw a man in full plate armor. Dot. Dot claimed that having fun was also a kind of battle. Then Mash arrived. He was still wearing workout gear, which surprised Finn. Mash admitted he'd never gone out with friends before, so he wasn't sure what to wear. He even brought an AB wheeler. Finn groaned at the thought of being seen with these two. Lance arrived late, but at least his clothes seemed normal, until he revealed his shirt, which bore a portrait of his sister and the word love. Finn was mortified. As they chatted, Dot brought up a popular game on Marchette Street. They soon found it. A display featured koalas and dartboards. The goal: tickle the koala's nose until it sneezes, then use its mucus to hit the dartboard. Mash explained that the hardened mucus became projectiles. It was called koala snot darts. Mash wanted to try. Dot was boasting beside him when the koala sneezed and its mucus hit Dot, drawing blood. Mash apologized. Finn just stood there, stunned. Dot, despite this, offered to demonstrate. When he tried, the mucus blasted Mash instead. Mash was silent for a moment, then suddenly put Dot in a flying armbar, suggesting they settle things with fists. Later, they walked together again. Lance was looking for a new wand and mentioned a famous wand shop nearby. He also brought up that the Divine Visionary selection was approaching, moved forward due to the chaos caused by Innocent Zero. Given their current coin count, they were eligible for the selection exam. Once they passed that, only the final screening remained. Lance said he didn't care that Mash lacked magic. He wouldn't hold back for his sister's sake. They arrived at the shop where wands floated freely through the air. An old man welcomed them and identified them as students from Easton. Mash was amazed by the number of wands. Dot was fired up. Finn considered changing his wand, and soon one flew to him. Mash was in awe. Finn explained that their magical power summoned a compatible wand. The shopkeeper said a wand was an extension of the body, a tool that helped release magic. A well-matched wand made magic easier to use. Lance summoned his wand next, impressing the shopkeeper and Finn. Dot, jealous but in denial, grumbled. The shopkeeper asked Mash if he wanted to try. Finn hesitated. Mash didn't have magic. But Mash noticed a wand in the corner, stuck in the floor. It looked ancient and heavy. The shopkeeper explained it had been there for years. Beneath it was said to be elf water, liquid used to make beautiful wands. But no one had ever pulled the wand free, not even the strongest mages. Dot and Finn yelled for the shopkeeper to stop before Mash did something unexpected. But Mash pulled the wand out easily. Water flowed from beneath it. The shopkeeper was stunned. Mash simply said that was the one he wanted. The man, still reeling, gave it to him. Lance, in the end, didn't buy anything. Shopping done, they resumed their outing. Lemon and Tom arrived late. The group spent the day visiting shops and enjoying themselves. Eventually, Dot, Lemon, Finn, and Tom collapsed from exhaustion. Mash quietly admired his new wand. They shouted that this was the best day of their student lives. Mash surprised them by saying he had fun too. He'd never gone out with friends before. He invited them to come back again. His friends were touched. Lance agreed, adding he'd bring his sister next time. At Easton Magic Academy, each dorm was supervised by a perfect. These three were among the best in the school, potential future divine visionaries. Later, the group counted their gold coins, 7 in total. Lance said that was enough for the selection exam. Mash mentioned the exam was near, but he wanted to visit home first. A flashback showed Mash speaking to Rain about going home. Rain was baffled. Why now? Mash didn't explain. He just said he would stay. Elsewhere, Order dined with a person. Order discussed a student without magic trying to become a divine visionary. He said Wahlberg was too old to make sound decisions, and it was his responsibility to prevent chaos. Mash, he said, must not be allowed to enter the selection exam. It was Orchidorm's perfect Margaret. Margaret wasn't easily swayed. She only cared about the rush. Order mentioned that Mash had defeated Abel without magic. Margaret was shocked. Order offered to clean up murder charges if he finished MASH. Margaret was shocked. Order offered to clean up criminal charges if he finished MASH. Margaret sat at her grand piano and played a haunting melody that seemed to envelop the entire space. Her subordinates were visibly shaken. Once she was satisfied, she uttered a word, one that we couldn't pronounce. Meanwhile, at home, Mash arrived. Regro asked how he was doing. Mash stuttered that it had been easy. Regro was overjoyed. Suddenly, Mash's friends appeared. Regro was stunned. Mash had friends? He admitted he never expected it, since he couldn't introduce Mash to the world. Dot explained that he and Mash weren't just friends, they were rivals, with Dot claiming to be the stronger one. Regro was stunned again. Lemon greeted Regro as her father-in-law. She declared herself Mash's future wife, adding they hadn't held hands yet, so they remained pure. Regro couldn't believe any of it. Dot brought herbal tea as a souvenir. Lance told him to stop and handed Regro a gift. It was merchandise. When Regro asked whose, Lance replied, "My sister's." Regro was confused, but Mash clarified that Lance hadn't learned yet that people had different priorities. Regro and Finn quietly observed the group. Regro commented that they were a strange bunch. Finn agreed. Still, Regro admitted that he never dreamed Mash would have such good friends and hoped it would last forever. Finn assured him it would. In the forest, Margaret and her subordinates flew on brooms. She wondered how Abel was defeated without magic. Suddenly, flying swords appeared. They dodged and landed. It was Rain. Margaret asked Rain if he was protecting Mash. He said he was simply there at the time. Margaret smiled at the sound of an ugly laugh. Back at home, Mash and his friends continued to enjoy their time together. Years ago, a competition was held for middle school students to identify promising magic users aged 13 to 15. Only one participant defeated all others alone. Suspicious of the overwhelming victory, the judges investigated and discovered the winner had lied about her age. She was only 9 years old. Her name, Margaret Macaron, future perfect of Orca Dorm. Back in the present, Margaret faced Rain. She didn't just plan to fight Mash, she intended to fight a divine visionary. With a flick of her hand, a grand piano appeared and she began playing. She called Rain a powerless winner. There was silence. Rain wondered if something was supposed to happen. Wesley. Margaret explained that not all powerful magic users cared about the visionary title. Some, like her, sought only pure strength. She asked which of them was truly stronger. They exchanged magic. The spells collided in a loud explosion. Meanwhile, Mash was at home playing a board game with his friends. The game seemed to reveal personal issues. Dot's flaw was overthinking, Lemon's was love. When Lance took his turn, the board predicted his little sister would bring home a boyfriend. He was so shocked he smashed into Mash's wall. Finn's result seemed normal, but Mash landed on a square that read, "Discovered to have no magic. Game over." Dot burst out laughing to hide his pain. Lemon grew annoyed. Lance stayed quiet. Dot and Lemon started arguing. Finn sat in silence, recalling Rain's words. Words only mean something when backed with action. If you can't act, it's no different from staying silent. Finn resolved to support his friends. Back at the duel, Margaret used shiver sound and howling sound. Musical notes floated around Rain, multiplying. She warned him not to cast a spell. They'd explode on his chant. She asked why people sought stimulation, art, love, sports, drugs, gambling, when they weren't necessary for survival. The answer, boredom is death. To her, excitement was life. Rain, to her, was dull, always helping others, never seeking thrills. He wasn't someone who could give her what she wanted. He should kindly step aside. But Rain answered. Mash, he said, was a brazen kid. Brave enough to declare his view to the world to change. The air grew tense. Margaret noticed the shift in Rain's aura. At Easton Academy, Neri spoke with Wahlberg. He said Margaret was just as famous as Rain. The only difference, Margaret had no interest in being a divine visionary. Wahlberg explained that while Rain seemed relaxed, he always acted when it counted. Then he asked Neri what he knew about marks. Neri said they increased with absolute magic power. Wahlberg confirmed this. Easton had seen many double-liners over centuries, but triple-liners, rare. Rain, it turned out, had become the youngest triple liner ever. Wahlberg declared that triple liners are those chosen by God himself. Back at the house, Mash rolled the dice again and landed on the same square. Game over. Everyone stared. Dot pointed out it was the second time. Lemon cheered Mash on, while Lance teased that Mash might never get past that square. Finn, confused, muttered that he didn't even know this game had game overs. Mash stepped outside. Dot commented that Mash looked fine, but deep down he had to be hurting. Finn agreed. Mash was clearly pretending. Lemon added that if she were in Mash's place, she'd blame society itself. They all quietly worried for him. Out in the woods, Mash had run far from the others. Once alone, he took out a giant cream puff and muttered that it was just for him now. But then he heard a sound nearby. Back at the duel, Margaret thought that witnessing a fellow mage awaken 3 lines was nothing short of a divine gift, something bestowed by the gods themselves. She believed Rain was trapped, triple liner or not. He still needed to chant, and her howling sound spell would detonate the moment he did. Rain then asked if Order had told her about Mash. Margaret feigned ignorance with a sly smile. Nearby, Mash overheard their conversation. Rain explained plainly that Mash couldn't use magic. Most would feel sad or resentful in that situation, but Mash didn't. He fought against his fate. Rain said Margaret wouldn't understand. She was too cunning, too selfish. She called his speech cute, but insisted she didn't care. Her subordinates believed in her. Margaret wasn't arrogant. She had spread her coins among dormmates because she didn't care about becoming a visionary. Yet, she still collected 10 coins, more than anyone else, last year. Margaret's skill wasn't just raw power, it was technique. She closed her eyes and imagined a theater of people cheering. She conducted the orchestra. Her companions played. She cast her sound orchestra spell toward Rain. Checkmate. He needed to chant. Elsewhere, Neri asked what made triple liners different from double liners. Wahlberg said they could awaken the true form of their wand. Triple liners could call upon gods through their wands. The scene shifted. Rain raised his wand. He chanted, and a shield deflected Margaret's magic. She was stunned by the sheer amount of magic power he released. Rain summoned Ares, the god of war. And his wand transformed, no longer a cane, but a godly spear, radiating overwhelming power. Repeat, Margaret froze, shocked to see the transformation. That wand, the sword cane, belonged to the divine visionary of war. Rain raised the spear. Checkmate. He cast Black Partisan toward her. Margaret stood there, stunned, because it was black magic. We returned to the moment Rain attacked Margaret with the Black Partisan. Margaret responded with a sound shield. But Rain's attack sliced through it easily, leaving a massive gash across the floor. His third line slowly faded soon after. Margaret also escaped. Mash suddenly appeared. He told Rain he needed to thank him. Rain said no need because he'd just been playing with rabbits in the forest. Mash asked if Rain likes bunnies. Rain reminded Mash that the selection exam was approaching. Mash nodded. He wasn't good at encouragement, but he had something to say. Mash was about to face a challenge unlike any he'd experienced before. If he failed, there would be no good outcome. So he had to win and give meaning to this trial. Mash agreed, noting again that Rain really loved bunnies. Rain didn't deny it. Elsewhere, blood marked a trail. Margaret was alive, carrying her unconscious subordinates. In her thoughts, she acknowledged that this was the power of a triple liner. Rain's massive wand increased the baseline of his magic so drastically that even his weakest spells carried the force of a second-level spell. She might have tried her second spell, but she had to save her men first. Maybe it was maternal instinct. The subordinate she carried apologized. If they hadn't been there, she could have used her real power. Margaret told him it was fine. After all, she believed in saving the best for last. As the semester break began, each of the heroes spent it their own way. Finn sat alone, staring at the gold coins Mash had given them. 3 each. He suddenly burst into tears, unable to handle the gesture, shouting and apologizing over and over. Lance stared silently at the fire, holding a picture of his little sister. Dot was frantically checking his luggage, unable to sleep from the hype. Meanwhile, Mash was with Regro. Regro told him he'd heard Mash's inability to use magic had been exposed and that prosecution awaited if he didn't meet expectations. Regro bowed his head, apologizing, if only he could have given Mash a normal life. Mash interrupted, saying he was happy. Regro was stunned. Mash said he had a dad who always looked out for him, experienced school life, made friends, and ate tons of cream puffs. He was thankful. Regro's eyes showed his relief. He made Mash promise to return safely. It was then explained that the path to becoming a divine visionary was divided into 3 stages: coin acquisition, the candidate selection exam, and the final divine visionary elect exam. Usually, 5 coins were needed to qualify for stage 2. However, due to the sudden escape of Innocent Zero, the exam was brought forward, requiring only 3 coins this time. The participants of the exam were revealed: Tomato, Ponteros, Domarks, LeBlanc, Russell, Max Land, and Aoreo Morris. Also joining were Dot Barrett and Finn Ames. The 4 students with the most coins were Carpaccio Luoying, Orchidorm, 4 coins, Lance Crown Adlerdorm, 5 coins, Margaret Macaron, Orchidorm, 5 coins. Mash Burndead, Adlerdorm, 7 coins. Mash recalled Wahlberg's warning this would be a difficult challenge. All examinees entered the arena. Meanwhile, a cheerful little girl walked while holding ice cream. She bumped into a man and dropped it. The man was Order. The girl apologized through tears, but Order remained indifferent. Back in the arena, the crowd cheered for Lance. On his way in, Mash encountered Order. Order told Mash that society is defined by standards, and Mash, by existing outside of them, was disrupting the entire system. In Order's view, Mash wasn't even human. As long as Order lived, he would never recognize Mash's existence. Mash flexed. He rejected the words. His muscles, Kevin, Tom, Mike, Kim, and Yamada, stood with him. He would fight with all his strength. Order was left stunned. Mash moved on and entered the arena center. The commentator was surprised and the audience sneered, recognizing Mash as the magicless candidate. They mocked him, called him embarrassing, told him to go home. Mash muttered that he wanted to go home. Finn admitted he couldn't blame him. The 12 candidates gathered. Then the host announced the start of the first game, an elimination round. Battlefield, the Dettervant Swamp. The objective, find a key and escape. Finn wasn't too worried, until they said the key was inside the swim bladder of a massive troll goose fish, and the only way to get it was to pop it like a balloon. Worse still, they'd be hunted by 3 Dettervants. Finn broke down, crying. This elimination test had to be passed to reach the real exam. Reflector mirrors would broadcast everything to the audience, so cheating was impossible. Suddenly, all participants were teleported into a terrifying forest. The match had begun. They looked around, assessing the environment. Then a Dettervant appeared behind LeBlanc. He attacked, but his magic didn't work. The host explained, Dettervants are immune to magic. 1 hit, and it's game over. LeBlanc was eliminated and sent back to the arena. Finn was still crying. Dot concluded that the only choice was to run and search for the key. Lance noted that the test gave no hint of the key's location. Making them run blindly wasn't a test, it was a trap. Unless there was a hidden purpose. Max theorized that the exam might test their creative use of magic to escape. The host confirmed he was right. The Dettervants were specially designed stand-ins, immune to magic. This was about how the examinees would respond to an unbeatable threat. Running away was an acceptable strategy. This stage was a test of how they'd run. Dot shouted that the school was insane. Finn just sobbed. Margaret smiled calmly. The audience grumbled. This year's candidates seemed so much weaker than the last batch, which included Rain. The host yelled, "Run like your life depends on it." Then Mash sprinted straight at a Dettervant and punched it hard in the muscle. The Dettervant collapsed, gasping. The crowd, the narrator, everyone was stunned. Wasn't the point of this test to run? LeBlanc looked on in disbelief. Margaret and Carpaccio remained quiet. Mash casually said he'd go find the key now. He returned to the moment Mash nearly ruined the exam. After he punched the dead Irvin, it got back up, completely unfazed. The host explained they were undead and regenerated quickly, hence the name. Mash, stunned, decided to run. While running, Mash wondered where the balloon holding the key could be. He thought things would be easier if his friends were around. He wasn't exactly the brightest among them. Suddenly, someone whistled. Mash followed the sound and quickly hid. The dead Irvins sniffed the area but soon wandered off. Max had whistled. He asked if the coast was clear and explained that the creatures reacted to sound but had poor eyesight, so they'd be safe if they kept quiet. Mash, embarrassed by his earlier actions, thanked Max for the help. Max shrugged it off. They'd do better as a team, he said, so he proposed they work together. Mash admitted he didn't know Max that well, but he'd saved him, so he agreed. Max thought Mash seemed a little too trusting. Max then explained the key's location could be deduced by the dead Irvins' movement patterns. It was a test of adaptability. Mash, overwhelmed by Max's explanation, froze. Max asked if he had passed out, and Mash apologized. Too many big words. Max simplified it. Just follow the dead Irvins. Elsewhere, Finn was crying behind a wall, while Dot's shouting attracted a dead Irvin. Lance appeared deep in thought. Meanwhile, Max and Mash tiptoed behind one of the creatures. Max warned not to make a sound. Mash nodded, but suddenly tripped, yet somehow planted his feet and stayed silent. They spotted a giant balloon. Max noted that the creatures hovered near the key. Under the balloon were bellows. Mash assumed it would be easy to pop with air pressure and press down. Max shouted in alarm, but it was too late. A loud noise echoed, drawing a dead Irvin toward them. Max blamed himself, saying his magic, which let him change the size of things, had shrunk the bellows. Max fell into deep thought on how to fill the balloon with air. Mash asked if they could just break it instead. Max gave it a try, but the balloon didn't pop. It made another loud noise, drawing more danger. They wondered if breaking the bellows would release the key. But even after trying, the air stayed inside. It was infused with magic. They'd need to use magic to burst it. While pondering, Max had an idea. Hidden behind a wall, Max enlarged the balloon using his magic. The audience watched through reflection mirrors. The audience thought Max was stupid. Mash, meanwhile, started breakdancing, confusing everyone. He did a headstand. He then began to spin faster and faster until he was breakdancing at dizzying speeds. Max explained the simple solution: enlarge the balloon and have Mash pump air into it with his spinning. The balloon expanded and finally burst. The audience was in awe. They had their key. Lance was shown using gravity magic to float and burst his balloon. Dot exploded his with his explong. Margaret had already acquired hers. Finn was still hiding and crying. Back with Mash and Max, they celebrated. Mash handed the key to Max, saying Max deserved it for helping him. Max was surprised, but said Mash was the one who actually obtained it. He pointed out that time affected their ranking, so Mash should go first. Mash hesitated, but Max revealed that Rain had told him about Mash. Though he didn't believe the stories at first, he was convinced now. Max said it was his selfish desire to help people like Mash and asked to prove himself. He wanted Mash to leave it to him. Mash agreed and thanked him before leaving. Max smiled, feeling lighter. Something grazed his forehead. He turned, and as he thought, it was Carpaccio Luo Ying of Orca Dorm. Max asked Rain if he'd done his best for his juniors. He challenged Carpaccio, who said nothing. Later, Mash returned to the arena. The host announced the candidates had returned. Mash was given water, which he gratefully accepted. Dot and Finn caught their breath, commenting on the exam's chaos. Lance was amazed Mash passed without magic. Mash said he had help. Just then, the host said only 9 could advance. Mash assumed Max would be next. Instead, Carpaccio walked in, carrying Max's unconscious body. He had beaten Max. The host questioned if this was necessary. It seemed like a declaration of war between dorms. Carpaccio stepped on Max's head and declared the weak had no value. Mash told him to stop and asked if that was really necessary. Carpaccio said nothing. Finn recognized Carpaccio as one of the top students, on par with Lance. As tensions rose, Carpaccio grabbed Mash's drink and splashed it on him, telling him to stay silent. But Mash caught it. The audience gasped. Calmly, he sealed the bottle, shook it, and drank. He explained it was 3 p.m., time for his homemade protein shake. Finn was shaken that Mash could react so fast. Mash explained the shake was made from powdered beans for protein. He didn't stop Carpaccio out of principle. It was just protein time. Then he said, Carpaccio might call people weak, but he hadn't met anyone stronger than Mash yet. Carpaccio said nothing as a heavy aura filled the air.